What if the person you trusted most, the one who raised you, suddenly revealed themselves to be capable of horrors beyond imagination? What if your father admitted to killing hundreds of people, burying them in secret places, and keeping journals of his crimes? That's the chilling claim made by Galina Trefil, a California woman whose words shook the internet in March 2025. She says her father, a retired psychiatrist named Jon Charles Trefil, quietly confessed to her that he had murdered more than 400 people over the span of decades. Her story exploded online and sent shockwaves across Mendocino County and beyond. Some called her brave for speaking out. Others questioned her motives, her evidence, and her credibility. At the center of the storm stands an aging man in his mid-80s, frail and in poor health, and the daughter who insists he has hidden the darkest of secrets for most of his life. Galina's account paints a horrifying picture. According to her, her father began killing in the 1950s and continued through the 1990s. She says he told her that during his most active years, he sometimes killed as often as once a month. She alleges he had what she described as murder cabins scattered across Northern California, in places like Campeche, Boonville, and Westport. In these cabins, she says he tortured, killed, and buried victims. She claims to have evidence: audio recordings of her father's voice admitting to killings, handwritten journals describing the crimes, maps pointing to burial sites, even photos that she says support her story. She insists she handed this evidence to authorities as early as January 2023, but says little was done until her claims went public in 2025 and went viral on social media. When Galina shared her story online, the world stopped to listen. Imagine scrolling through Facebook and seeing a daughter announce that her father is a hidden serial killer responsible for hundreds of deaths. Her post traveled fast, spreading from local chatter to national headlines, catching the attention of true crime followers everywhere. Could it be true? Could an elderly man living quietly in Mendocino County have lived such a double life, killing in secret for decades without ever being caught? Authorities could not ignore it. The Mendocino County Sheriff's Office confirmed that Galina had been in contact with them long before her post, handing over recordings, journals, and even maps. They searched several of the areas she identified as burial sites. They also took DNA from her father and compared it to samples in unsolved cases. One comparison was made to DNA evidence from a 1970s murder, but it did not match. His DNA was uploaded to the National Codes database, and again, no matches were found. Investigators also listened to the recordings Galina provided. What they heard did not convince them. They described the tapes as difficult to understand, with much of the audio consisting of groans or mumbles from her father, who appeared weak and barely conscious at the time. Some of his responses sounded less like confessions and more like unclear noises made in response to leading questions. That did not stop Galina from standing by her story. She insists the journals, recordings, and maps are authentic. She says her father openly confessed to her about his crimes and that she has spent years living with the unbearable weight of knowing the truth about him. To her, the silence of law enforcement only proves how deeply the story is being ignored or covered up. Her mother, however, sees it differently. Galina Trefil, Jon's wife and Galina's mother, has publicly dismissed the claims. She has called them baseless, suggesting her daughter is exaggerating, misinterpreting, or even inventing the story. She describes her husband as an old man in failing health, not a hidden killer. Her reaction shows the fracture this allegation has created within the family itself. A daughter determined to expose a monster, a mother determined to protect her husband's name, and a father who cannot or will not speak for himself. The community, meanwhile, is left stunned. Was this just the imagination of a woman seeking attention? Was it the desperate cry of someone trying to stop a dangerous man before the truth is buried with him forever? Or could this really be one of the largest hidden serial killings in American history? As of now, investigators have found no bodies, no conclusive evidence, no matches to known cases. But the questions Galina has raised continue to echo. If her father truly confessed, why has no proof been uncovered? Why did she wait so long to come forward? And if she is wrong, why would she risk her own reputation and her family's by making such claims? This is only the beginning of the story. In the next part of the story, we'll look more closely at what investigators actually discovered at the so-called murder cabins, the forensic details that either strengthen or weaken her claims, and the possible motives behind both her father's alleged actions and her decision to go public. Before you move on, take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this video so you'll be the first to be notified when I post another true crime story. When Galina's accusations went public in 2025, the world wanted answers. Could this frail man, Dr. Jon Charles Trefil, really have killed hundreds of people without ever being caught? Was his daughter exposing a lifetime of hidden evil? Or was she spinning a story that collapsed under scrutiny? The Mendocino County Sheriff's Office moved carefully. They confirmed they had been in contact with Galina long before her viral post, dating back to January 2023. At that time, she had already turned over a collection of evidence. Handwritten journals she said belonged to her father, a set of maps pointing to specific rural areas, and recordings of him allegedly confessing to murder. Deputies followed up. They went to some of the locations Galina identified as burial sites. These were remote spots in Northern California. Forested land near small towns, back roads rarely traveled, and the ruins of old cabins she claimed her father once owned. She called them his murder cabins. To her, these places were where countless people met their end, hidden away from the world. Investigators searched, but they did not find what she promised. No bones, no signs of human remains, no forensic evidence. What they did find were ordinary forest clearings, stretches of dirt and grass, and abandoned structures lost to time. The journals were examined. They contained cryptic writing, some of it violent, some of it strange. But nothing in them could be directly connected to specific missing people or unsolved crimes. They seemed more like fragments of thought than the detailed confessions of a man who had supposedly killed hundreds. The recordings were perhaps the most disturbing piece. Galina had taped her father in recent years, when he was in declining health. On some of the audio files, she could be heard asking him leading questions. How many people did you kill? Or where did you bury them? His responses were often slurred, weak, or incoherent. Sometimes he groaned. Sometimes he muttered words that were difficult to interpret. To Galina, these were confessions. To investigators, they were the sounds of an ill man, too frail to clearly answer. The sheriff's office went further. They collected her father's DNA and compared it to samples from unsolved cases. One particular test involved evidence from a 1970s homicide in Northern California. The results came back negative. Jon Trefil's DNA did not match. His DNA was also uploaded to CODIS, the national criminal database used to match suspects to cold cases. Again, no hits. This lack of evidence left authorities in a bind. On one hand, the claims were explosive. If true, they pointed to one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. On the other, there was no physical proof tying Jon Trefil to any crime. No remains, no matches, no verifiable confession. Just the word of his daughter and a set of materials that raised more questions than they answered. Still, investigators did not dismiss her entirely. They admitted her allegations were serious enough to warrant careful review. Detectives sifted through missing persons cases, trying to see if any could possibly connect to her father. But without DNA, without remains, and without credible witnesses, there was little they could do. This brings us to a deeper, more unsettling question. Why would Galina make these claims? Was she seeking justice, believing every word her father told her? Or could there have been another motive? Some speculated she may have been influenced by trauma, family conflict, or mental health struggles. Others wondered if the journals and tapes were misinterpreted or worse, manipulated. It's also possible her father did make strange, confusing statements in his old age, and Galina took them literally. Elderly people with dementia or cognitive decline sometimes blur reality and fantasy, blending fragments of memory with imagined stories. Could Jon's words have been the confused ramblings of illness, mistaken by his daughter for confession? Galina, however, stood by her story. She insisted her father's words were deliberate, not confused. She said she carried the burden of knowing the truth for years, and finally chose to go public because she could no longer live with the silence. To her, this was not a fantasy, but a duty. She wanted the world to know who her father really was. Her mother, Kanda, rejected it all. She described the allegations as lies and saw them as an attack on her family's name. This sharp divide between mother and daughter only deepened the mystery. One side painted Jon as a frail old man being slandered, the other as a hidden monster whose crimes were finally being revealed. And in the middle stood Jon himself, silent, weak, and largely unable to defend or explain. Law enforcement never formally interviewed him about the allegations, citing his fragile medical condition and the lack of probable cause. His silence leaves a void that can never be completely filled. The public was left with two possible realities. In one, Jon Charles Trefil was a quiet man who lived a normal life, his daughter fabricating or exaggerating his story. In the other, he was one of the deadliest serial killers in American history, his crimes so vast they were almost impossible to prove. The truth, at least for now, remains hidden. But one thing is certain. Whether true or false, Galina's claims have left scars on her family, torn apart by accusation and denial. For the people in Mendocino County, the claims hit close to home. This is a rural area, a place where people know each other, where families have lived for generations. To suddenly be told that an elderly psychiatrist in their community may have been secretly killing people for decades was both shocking and destabilizing. Neighbors began asking, if it were true, who were the victims? Were they people who had gone missing years ago without explanation? Were they runaways, drifters, or even locals whose families never found answers? If Jon Trefil had really killed more than 400 people, as Galina claimed, then entire generations of unsolved disappearances might be tied to him. The idea that this could happen in their midst, hidden for half a century, was deeply unsettling. The psychological toll of this case cannot be underestimated. Imagine being Galina, convinced you know the truth but unable to prove it. Imagine being Kanda, certain your daughter is spreading lies about the man you've spent your life with. Imagine being Jon, whether guilty or innocent, hearing your daughter accuse you of unimaginable crimes in front of the entire world. Each perspective is filled with pain, disbelief, and fracture. The wider community, too, has been left with lingering questions. If Jon Trefil was innocent, what does that say about the dangers of public accusation in the age of social media, where a viral post can make someone infamous overnight? If he was guilty, then what does it mean that one of the deadliest killers in American history lived undetected, never brought to justice, his victims still hidden? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, if the truth lies somewhere between those two extremes, will we ever know it? For now, the official stance remains clear. Authorities have not found evidence to prove Jon Trefil committed the crimes his daughter alleges. But the story continues to live online, debated, dissected, and speculated over. Some believe Galina has exposed the next great unsolved horror. Others believe she has destroyed her family with falsehoods. In the end, this case reminds us of the fragility of truth. It shows how memory, belief, and evidence can clash, leaving us in a fog where certainty is impossible. And it forces us to confront the darkest of possibilities. That evil can hide in plain sight, or that suspicion itself can tear lives apart. What do you believe? Was Jon Charles Trefil a hidden serial killer who escaped justice, or a frail man wrongly accused by his own daughter? The answer may never be clear, but the questions will linger long after this story fades from the headlines. If you followed this story to the end, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Galina? Do you think the authorities should dig deeper, or that the case should finally be put to rest? Let your voice be part of the conversation. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications so you'll never miss another true crime story.